techniques for establishing your mind in a state of samadhi, and there were these three elements of it. One is tattva jnana, vasana kshaya, and a mononasa. And then he quoted from the Yoga Vasista to explain that if you just resolve to control your mind without understanding the technique, the process which you are supposed to follow to reach there, it's not going to bear any fruit. So there are two ways to do it. One is that you sort of, you just out of a kind of a strong resolve, hatena, you just do it. I'll definitely do it. You just make a blind resolution, like New Year resolutions that we do, that we're going to achieve this. That may not necessarily bear any fruit. The second one is that you do in a gradual manner, hatena kramena cha. So you understand that this is a tricky process, and therefore you will do it in a continuous, sustained, and a gradual manner, ascending from one level or one stage of mental peace or tranquility or equanimity and clarity of perception and equanimity, and ascend to the next higher level. Sane sane ruparamit. That's what Bhagavan had said earlier. You cannot do it at one go. And Bhagavan, in order to explain this, is saying asangseng mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyase sena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. I understand that what you're saying is right, because Arjuna has expressed his inability to reach at this level of great resolution, which sort of Krishna has given him a long lecture, and he's trying to, it's kind of a pushback he's doing as a student. And Bhagavan, without getting perturbed about it or getting agitated or anxious about Arjuna's problems, is reassuring that you are quite a capable student and you can in fact reach there. But this reaching there have to be done in a certain way which is feasible and practicable. And that is that you will do it gradually. Hatena kramena cha. You cannot do it. Upaveshyo upaveshyiva chitta gyena muhuramuhu na sakyate manojetum bina yuktim aninditam. So you require a bit of logic. You have to convince the mind that don't jump around. If you do it, you are not going to get anywhere. Because you are a Vedanti, he sort of is putting a lot of emphasis on analysis, self-understanding about this matter, and is comparing the way you cannot control an elephant which is in heat or which is kind of in wilderness, is trying to run around and uproot trees and stuff like that when it's angry. You need that ankusha, you need that instrument with which the Mahot sort of controls the elephant by reminding itself that there is a master controlling you. I'm there. I'm that Vivek, I'm your discrimination, I'm the boss. So he's saying Adhyatma Vidya Dhigamaha Sadhu Sangama Evacha Vasana Samparityaga Pranaspanda Nirodhana. So 4 techniques he mentions. That one is what is that ankusha? How do you control this mind which is jumping around? First thing is Adhyatma Vidya Dhigamaha, some understanding about how the mind functions, how we should respond to external stimuli, why we behave the way we do, all these sort of things. And then Vasana Samparityaga, Samyak Rupena Parityaga. You try to sort of, without keeping a few desires in you, you have to sort of comprehensively dismiss the desires which are trying to tempt you, distract you. And if you are unable to control your vasanas because of prarabdha, adhyatma vidyadhigamaha, then sadhu sangama. If you cannot fully grasp the subject matter, so you try to be friends with a bright student. Similarly, you try to pick up friendship with some spiritually more evolved people. So do a bit of satsanga. That's very important, especially in grihastha life. You have to have your own virtuous circle. Avoid people who will do damage to your spiritual sadhana. Pick up a few friendship with people who are little spiritually inclined, not the ones who are the party goer types or who would like to have a booze party on a weekend. but you don't want to do it anymore. You have to avoid those friends and pick up people who are, more like you, interested in studying or meditating, or a little more tuned to the inner configuration of the whole mind and stuff like that, which sort of gives you a greater sense of resolve, greater sense of who you are, a greater sense of what you want to achieve in a more resolute and more self-aware way, that you are not trying to sort of run around and do things in a haste, but you're sort of more composed, right? So the things turn out to be more smooth with you, because you are very organized with a self-perception and a clear understanding of who you are. These things are very important, and these things become easier where you are lucky or privileged to have a few friends, or you have access to a few people who are spiritually ahead of you, or comparable, more or less at a comparable stage. So you sort of can, it's like there's a sense of mutual reinforcement and support between you. And then, if you cannot find those things, you have to work on your desires. You say that I'm too knowledgeable, I'm too well read, I cannot be friends with these sadhus and monks. I don't find them very interesting. Maybe you are a technocrat and somebody is a social worker, somebody is a lawyer. So your professional lives are so different from each other that you don't know how to pick up a friendship with them, or maybe their food habit is pretty different from yours. So it may not work out to be family friends. Your wife may not like his wife, or your husband may not like her husband. So these kind of issues are there. He says, don't you worry. What you do is you work on vasana samparityaga. You use your discrimination and tattva jnana that you have, and try to drop your desires slowly and slowly, saying that, look here, you have to have a mithyatva jnana through dosha darsana, by finding faults and limitations. Whatever you think is pleasurable and good for you, you try to change the milestones and the goalposts, and you find out your destination. You say, this is where you want to go, so I am not going to board this bus, or I am not going to engage in this sort of hobbies. I want to do these and these things. Well, imagine that if you fail there as well, because you have some powerful forces of sanskara or past impressions troubling you, and you cannot stop going to, let's imagine, say, listening to hard rock, or going to parties, or joining some groups of people who do things which you loved doing few years back. You don't like it internally, but you're part of those groups, so it's very difficult to avoid those friend circles. What do you do then? How do you prepare your mind in a way that it refuses anymore to do what it was doing? He's saying, in that kind of a situation, you do prana spanda nirodhanam. You do breathing exercises. So whatever be the restlessness in your mind or trouble, if you start doing pranayama, breath control exercises, these breathing exercises immediately bring a sense of peace in you, what they call samatha, watching your mind and bringing concentration, that samatha meditation in the Buddhist balance, right? And then he goes to explain the thing at the next level, and he quotes again from, so yastu basananam ati prabalyat taha tyaktum na saknoti tasya pranaspanda nirodha eva upayah. So the one who fails in the other three, he has to do pranayama, breath control exercises, kriya yoga. Yes, then he's saying pranaspanda vasanayor chitta prerakatva tayor nirodhe chitta santir utpatyate, because this pranayama and vasana, desire and breath, if you can actually put some kind of a harness on these two, if you start controlling what you want to do, and what you do not want to do, and if you are able to also ensure that you will do so much of breath control exercises every day, the mind instantly falls in line. What is discipline? This is a issue a lot of people have discussed. I'm just repeating it. You must have heard it before. Essentially, discipline is what? Discipline is two things. One is your commitment to carry out a certain resolution, You have made a promise to yourself that I want to do it. So you wanted to do it. So let's imagine that you went to a party and there was a kind of an altercation. Somebody said something, you didn't like it. And you decided for yourself, I'm never again going to join a party with these people because they sort of lose self-control after they get drunk. Okay, you made that kind of a resolution. So the ability to implement the resolution long after the emotion in which it has been made has been forgotten. That is a key important thing in sadhana. So let's imagine that one scores very low marks in a certain paper and you make a resolution that I'm going to study 2 hours a day only for this paper so that in the next semester I'm going to score very high. But what happens is that after 5 6 days you don't pay any heed to it because you start scoring high marks in your class internal assessments and you feel confident. But then the exam next semester comes and again you pay a heavy price for it. How do you deal with it? They say that long after the emotion in which you're making that decision, I'm going to avoid doing this, I shall not do this, or I shall do this. If you have made that decision in a certain emotion because you are struck with failure with regard to something, but that emotion evaporates after some time. It's an emotional quality of the mind. It's not going to be there for all time to come. The emotional go. Like a lot of people love and get married, and then they start fighting because the emotion in which they resolve to stay together for life, that has evaporated. I mean, how do you ensure it? There is where is discipline. So it's kind of more associated with your willpower and how to moderate your emotional behavior and your temperament of the mind and stuff like that. So that is what is vasana kshaya. How do you control your desires? And there is another important thing about discipline, which is a very good way of looking at it, is trying to love what you should do. Generally, we love something and we are required to do something. So that we should do Vedanta, we may not necessarily love it all the time. If there is a very important, interesting cricket match, or maybe there is somebody speaking, a political leader, you might like to listen to that, even though you had resolved that you're going to read some spiritual text at this particular hour of the day. You may be watching election news, or maybe watching something else on wildlife, or anything for that matter that interests you, maybe a game or something. However, being able to love to do what you should do is a very key aspect of the sadhana. That is vasana kshaya. And then what? Prana spanda. How to control your breath. Because you know that if you can control your breath, I mean, this is what is advised to a lot of people who have panic attacks. I mean, if you have a panic attack, if you have anxiety syndrome, whatever, what the psychiatry, I mean, good counselors and brain trainers advise you to do is that you put yourself at a particular place and start breathing regularly at a certain pace, and then slowly that anxiety, that emotional turmoil which has suddenly emerged and erupted in your consciousness will slowly subside. Maybe before an interview, maybe you are going to have a conversation with a brother with whom you had some difference of opinion. So when you're going to maybe discuss some property issues, maybe you're going to discuss with somebody some relationship issues, maybe over anxious before you start the conversation. And what happens is when you actually start the conversation, you don't have a conversation. What you have is a uproar. You have a kind of a very quarrel kind of a thing, isn't it? So what you do is that you do breath control, and has wonderful results. Then to explain that, he's again quoting from Yoga Vasishta. Dve vije chitta brikshasya. This particular tree called chitta vritti, the modifications of the mind stuff so called chitta brikshasya, prana spanda navasani. Two things. One is the breath aspect, okay? One is the breath aspect, the other one is that the vasana, desires, breath and desire. Ekasminscha tayoho shine kshipram dve api nasyatah. If you can control one of them, if you're very good at controlling breath, every morning you do that pranayama, and if you can continue to do it after some time, what happens is the brain starts to slow down, stabilize. It's not super exciting. And if you can master one, the other thing will go. Like if you become a master in Kriya Yoga, automatically your interest in a lot of external things which otherwise are very tempting, very very exciting for you, shall lose their influence on you. Similarly, if you can lose your vasana, desires, then automatically your breath becomes stable because excitement goes down. Your breath also becomes very smooth. And during sleep, for example, we breathe very normally. Whether the boy is having a disturbed sleep, the mother understands by putting her hand on the back of her child, and the baby is breathing in a very irregular manner or it's very excited. The mother knows the baby isn't well. Maybe she has some health problem. The baby is asleep but it's not happy. It's crying once in a while. The mother is very concerned. Similarly, we can mother our own mind by being caring, by being sensitive to it. Then pranayama durabhyasaiv yuktya cha gurudattaya atmanasana yogena pranaspando nirudhyate. And how do you sort of control the breath? And so he's saying what? Pranayama durabhyasaiv. By doing sustained and a very committed practice, repeated abhriti, a practice of these breathing exercises, and then yuktya. Yuktya, why? Because we have known that it's very difficult to control a mad elephant called mind without ankusha, some kind of a hook with which you can hit it and hold it. And what is that? That is yukti, some rationality you want to bring into your mind, say that don't get over emotional. That's what most of the boys and girls suffer, and the parents advise them, what happened? No, that fellow is not talking to me. So what happened? There are more people going to talk to you. What's the problem? There's not, even if he or she talks to you, what is the benefit? You're just friends. Be friends with someone else. We do a lot of counseling for the teenagers. Similarly, so you're saying you have to have that yukti, that some kind of tattva jnana, guru dattaya, what has been given by the acharya, by the guru, by the preceptor. And then what? Asana, asana yogena. Asana means having that location where you will sit and do this pranayama exercises. And sometimes you have to do a control and regulation of your food. So, for example, if you are taking a lot of spicy food or a lot of non-vegetarian food or taking a lot of stimulants like caffeine or maybe alcohol or maybe tobacco or something else, they sort of agitate your senses and the neurons and everything in the brain sort of all the time in a very excited state. And a lot of people do that because they are overstressed at work. But what it does to the overall thing, it becomes very fragile. So it's kind of controlled from outside. So you have to control and regulate your food habits. And if you can do both, that sthiram sukham asana. To be able to do pranayama, you have to have the ability to have and to establish yourself for a longer period of time, like half an hour, 1 hour, without feeling finicky or restless, to be able to do it. Whether pranayama or even studies or anything, you need to have some kind of a stable mind. Prana spando nirudhyate, then you succeed in pranayama. Then asanga vyavaharitvad, okay, bhava bhavana varjanat. And then what happens is that you don't connect and attach yourself to too many people, because you want to do what? You want to master the art of vasana tyaga and pranaspanda nirodha, controlling the breath and sort of having a detachment to a lot of things which are very otherwise very attractive to you. They are objects of your desire, but you are purifying your consciousness so that they are no more attractive for you. That's the way we can look at it. So what he's saying is that asanga vyavaharitva, because you are trying to sort of, you're not lonely anymore, as the people say. The idea is to avoid feeling lonely and being able to live your life alone. Because if you are too approval seeking or too dependent and emotionally on someone else, then if someone sort of is not coming at a certain point of time, like in the afternoon you want to take a walk and you expecting a certain friend to come and join you, If she or he doesn't call you up, or he or she is busy with your children or something, you feel very upset and you don't go out for evening walk. That shouldn't happen. So having the ability to be alone without feeling lonely, that's a good sign of being a adept in yoga. I mean, that's the minimum that we require. Okay. And then bhava bhavana varjanam. Bhava bhavana, that sansara bhavana, that idam me shat, idam me syat. I want to do this, I want to meet that fellow. It'll be good to go there and achieve these and X, Y, Z, all sorts of the resolutions that we do. By abandoning this kind of false resolutions, not the real ones. The real ones is that you have a few duties towards your children, towards your wife or husband, towards the society, your family. These are fine. And then you add the spiritual aspirations, which are your goals. So you have a few inherited responsibilities, and you are taking up your own voluntary responsibility to discover yourself as a student of Vedanta. So this is the real aspiration you have. Bhava bhavana varjanat, because you are abandoning this, fruitless attachments that sort of tempt you all the time, pull you away from your own goal, your own destination. Sarira nasa darshitvat, and then you know that this body is going to fall, right? And that this doctor in Bombay called Manisha Yadav, there was this news flash a while ago. I was checking the Google News. This lady apparently exactly 36 hours back, maybe yesterday morning, she had sort of, or maybe, yeah, yesterday morning, she had given this particular, or maybe the day before, she has given that a Facebook post in which it says that this is perhaps my last good morning. We may not meet here again, but the body dies, the soul doesn't. It's immortal. Goodbye, take care. That's all she has written. And she dies in exactly 36 hours. Now, I'm sure she must have suffered physically, but I can feel that she had psychologically prepared herself to abandon her body. So this is what in the Tibetan book of Living and Dying is a beautiful book. And Ivan Venge, I think, has written that beautiful book. And Tibetan Book of the Dead is there about the Bardo Joan, that it's very important to sort of also prepare psychologically and wake up to the truth that we are not here for all time to come. We're here for a while. Why? It could be a few years, decades, that's all. But we aren't here for a permanent period of time. Even though we say we have got a permanent job, we are not permanent. So this is Deha is Nasavan. It's still anyway, today, tomorrow, it's going to fall. And when you have that feeling, then what happens? Vasana na pravartate. The desires that you have, a lot of desires, then you will not have that strong craving for. I mean, I myself have experienced it because I was a hostage in the Mumbai terror attack. So I was sitting, and then you feel that you are in a complete samadhi state. You become very relaxed because anytime you may be shot dead. You just quite, when you are anxious for a few hours, then you are in a very Buddha-like in a state of being. You just relax because anyways you're just there, and you're not going to gain anything by getting panicked. So that moment, I was not experiencing any craving. There was this fridge. I'm just sharing this personal experience. There was a fridge, and somebody called me up and said, "What did you take?" I said, "Nothing." It was already 36 hours. They said, "Why did you open the fridge?" And there are these dry fruits and some, this Coke and stuff like that, fruit juices. You can just take out anything and have it. And I saw it. I just had a few nuts, but there was no real desire. Why? Because you're sort of face to face with one possible eventuality called death. So there is no great desire. So when you realize that this whole experience we call our life is just for a while, and when we sort of establish our consciousness firmly on a realization of this particular truth, which is unavoidable, we cannot avoid this truth. Death is part of life. Every life, end of the day, is death. So we just have to accept it. Then Corona loses its power over us. We are much more peaceful. You are not anxious. It doesn't mean you're going to fall ill deliberately, but you just cool. I mean, because you realize the Vedantic secret thereof. And he's saying then he's not disturbed by Vasana. Then if he is doing Vedanta, his mind is much more stable. Vasana samparityagat chittam gacchati achittatam, because you have abandoned all the desires. Vasana samparityagat, samyak rupena parityagat. You comprehensively drop and dismiss your desires. Then what happens? Then chittam, your mind, gacchati, it goes, attains what? It attains achittatam. Here achittatam will refer to the loss of its natural tendency to modify itself and acquire a lot of forms, associate with a lot of subject matters, run towards external objects. That particular characteristic which describes this mind, the mind stops behaving the way it's normally inclined to do without vasanakshaya, without the dropping of the desires. But once you have dropped the desires, the mind kind of becomes a different person. It behaves in a very different way. Okay. Then, like for example, if you remember in school days, you would sometimes find that you will have a couple of friends. They trouble and bully all people. But that particular day at school, when one of these students, like whether boys or girls, there'll be just one or two, and they trouble everyone else, and they are kind of very difficult to win over. They can trouble anyone. But the days on which the one friend hasn't come to school, the other one is very peaceful. He's not doing any mischief. And you sometimes ask that fellow, boy or girl, how come you're such a nice guy? Why do you do all the mischief that you do when your friend is around? And the other guy you'd find will say the same thing when this boy or girl hasn't come to school. That means what? It's like when two becomes a crowd, they become terrible when they become together. So it's very important to be alone. So when you kind of dissociate from these vasanas or desires, you are a completely different person. With desires, you are a different kind of a normal swabhavika, which means all the time, inclined, tempted, and all sorts of things that generally the mind tends to associate itself with will appear in your behavior. On the other hand, when we are meditating or we become desireless, we are completely different people. So it gets what? Achittatam. It gets a dharma which is not like itself because it's moved towards equanimity and peace and quietude and things like that. Then prana spanda nirodhacha, and then you do pranayama. If you control your breath, discipline and regulate your breath, then what happens? Jathe sasi tathakuri. Then the teacher says, if you can control your breath, you become an adept in pranayama and you can drop your desires. Okay, you want to go out for a walk in the middle of the night? Okay, go. I know you can't be wrong because you're already sort of a good friend of your inner self. Nothing is going to lead you astray. Nothing can disturb you in life because you are composed. You are reunited with yourself. Jathe sasi tathakuru, because he will become a vidhyatma. He will do what is sastra vidha, not sastra nisiddha. He will do what is moral, what is good, which is shreya. He will not do anything which is priya and antagonistic to what is shreya. That fellow will not do that again. Etavan matrakam manye rupam chittasya raghava, o Rama. This is what that done in these minds, this is how it appears. Then he's saying, Yad bhavanam vastuno antar vastutvena rasena cha. Okay? Yeah, Yad bhavanam vastuno antar vastutvena rasena cha. And then, so if you sort of understand the mind without attributing to it that this is its essential nature is going to behave the same way all the time, And if you are ready to experiment by dropping these adverse influences, which forces this mind to behave in a certain way, you will be a different person. That's broadly what it is saying. Okay, so if you can do it, that this particular antarvastutvena, that this is his essential nature, and this is his dharma, these are the qualities of the mind. Okay, so if you, and then you are kind of free. Yad bhavan vastuna. Okay, then he's going to the next thing. Yadana bhavyate kinchit. Hyopadeya rupi yat. Sthiyate safalam tyaktva sadachittam na jayate. And then what? When you do not materialize that this is here, this is what I will not like to do because I don't find any pleasure in it, and this is upadaya, I want to do it, and then you are caught up in these dualities and you get engaged in a hell lot of hanopadaya. These should be there. What is here and what is upadaya is also required from the Vedantic standpoint. But the kind of decisions the mind makes on its own, if you do not get into that, because even if you are interested in punya, remember that is also a chitta vritti, and it will have its own karmic influence. We are talking about nirvikalpa samadhi. We are talking about what is called asampratyata samadhi, at a very higher level of niruddha samadhi, where the mind becomes completely free from any modification, any change in the way it behaves. We are talking about that higher state. So the moment you have here and upadaya, this is what I shouldn't do, this is what I will do, then this is slightly different from the way a Westerner or a management coach will look at it. They will talk about positive thinking. You should do ethical behavior. You read Stephen Covey. So they will bring in all those things which are very useful for your professional, social, or even family life. Not a problem. But when it comes to the inner search, to understand what the mind is all about, the Indian tradition tells you something radically different. It says, no, the problem is not that you are not doing good things. The problem lies in the fact that you are not trying to understand that when the mind is allowed to be active, sometimes it will do good things, sometimes it will do bad things, and it is more likely to do what you would otherwise like when you are ethically inclined, when you are wiser. So, a lot of us do a lot of things, and later on we sort of feel repentant as to why we did it. And why does that happen? Because we have become wiser. We have learned from experience. And we look back and we feel bad. We don't feel proud as to why we have done it. Now what he's saying is that in yoga, what they're saying is the mind is more likely to produce very good results if you can dust it clean by putting an end to all modifications. Don't try to do what is good, and don't push yourself to doing, because your mind is constantly being kept restless. It fatigues, and then the old enemies find their way in. But if you remain alert, if you pacify the mind, if you train it to be quiet through breath control and dropping of the desires, then you experience a certain peace. The impact of that peace stays for weeks. If you can do some like Vipassana course, you have that resort where they go and do meditation for a few days and they come back. It's like your vehicle has been serviced. It gives very good results. So the Indian approach or Buddhist approach or the Vedantic or the yogic approach is radically different from what a normal trained Western psychologist or counselor will tell you how to be happy. You'll go by their own experimental science. But this is what is the fundamental basis, that the mind is much better preserved by training it not to function at all. If you can train it not to function at all and just relax and be quiet, then the true potential of the mind is unraveled. That is what yoga is all about. That the true potential is unraveled the more and more we learn how not to lose ourselves in the thought clutter, too many ideas, too many thoughts, excellent speakers, but very helpless husbands and sons or wives. They often look very miserable in personal life because they are somewhere kind of disconnected from the inner self. And that is how here it's not about being a great intellectual or a great psychologist. Our own yogic psychology is all about abandoning much of the things that we respect and value in other branches of thought, like Western psychology. Okay, so then he's saying Yadana Bhagyate Kinchit. Okay, Hyopadaya Rupi Yat Sthiyate Sakalam Tyaktva Tada Chittam Na Jayate. Then the mind isn't born. That means that particular practice of modification, that particular thing doesn't materialize. Then avasanatvat satatam yada na manute manaha amanasta tadodeti paramatma pada prada. If you can avasanatvat, because you are not having desires anymore, avasanatvat, because your mind doesn't have desires in it, it's free from desires. Satatam yada na manute manaha, and then it's no more thinking again and again about objects of desire and stuff like that. Amanasta, what is that amanasta? Is explaining that amanasta, that means he's mentioned earlier that it goes achittatam, the non-mind, non-thoughtfulness. Look at it that way, that a mind without the mental modification. So that is the true state of mindfulness. Mindfulness without a mind. So when the consciousness becomes mindful, without minding too many thoughts, that is what? Amanasta. That particular amanasta, that state of being free from the mental modification, tadoteti, that particular mindfulness, then it emerges on the horizon. And it's capable of giving you what? Paramatma Padam. So it can give you that self-realization or liberation. Beautiful, isn't it? So let's make sense of what we have studied so far and slowly move forward. Now he's explaining this and taking us further. Madhusudana Saraswati. Atra do eva upayo. So there are two techniques now that we have discussed all this, that Vasanakshaya and Pranayama. Upayo parevasito pranaspanda nirodha, okay, and nirodhartham abhyasaha. So abhyasa and vairagya, these are the two things, isn't it? So vairagya is related to what? Vasana tyaga. Abhyasa is all about that pranayama in order to have mononasha. Abhyasa vairagya Bhagavan mentions to Arjuna, and that's being elaborated in the following sentences in his commentary. Atra dvau eva upayo paryavasito pranaspanda nirodhartham abhyasaha. What is abhyasa? Doing this pranayama, this breath control exercises. Vasana parityagartham cha vairagyam iti. And what is vairagya? Vasana artha. Artha is what? That object. What is the object of your desire? Can you drop it, dismiss it, forget about it? That is vairagya. Sadhu sangam adhyatma vidyadhigamau to abhyasa vairagya upapadakataya. Then the other two he mentioned, that sadhu sangha and adhyatma vidya adhigama, that you should have some elementary intellectual training in the science of the self, what the mind and body is about, how does it function, why do we do things the way we do, all that particular thing. He's saying they, and the particular first thing is sadhu sangama, having some satsang, some relationship, some interaction with pious people, and spiritual people. These two can in fact be kind of be made part of, can be included, subsumed under what? Abhyasa, vairagya, upapadakataya. Because they kind of, if you have abhyasa and vairagya, these things will naturally sort of, in order to do them, if you do this, abhyasa, vairagya fructify much faster. Upapadakataya. Anyatha siddhau. Anyatha siddhi is what? I mean, this is a technical term in Nyaya. It's like A student is going to give the examination. He has the books, he has some theoretical literature with him and some practice books, and he's doing it. When that boy is studying and that girl is studying for some engineering entrance or medical entrance tests, the grandmother, the mother isn't around and she's doing a job, she's busy. The grandma sort of keeps an eye on this boy all the time, sitting there. Or bete kya kar rahe? What are you doing? Are you doing this? Are you? The grandma is all the time around. Now, who's going to take the examination? The boy. What is he going to write there? Whatever he has studied. How is the grandma relevant? Even if the grandma didn't sit there, if he studied the way he did, he'll still score whatever marks he ends up with. So this grandmother is kind of his anyatha siddha. Or for example, take another example, that there is a painter who is painting. And when he's painting, his father is there, coming to watch what he's doing. Once in a while goes off. And you can say that if the father isn't there, the son will not be born. Yeah, that's an argument. And the father kind of was emotionally appreciating what he was doing. In that sense, he had a motivational influence. You can also say that. But is he the cause of the painting? No, he's not. And what are the material causes? The color, the canvas, the brushes, and stuff like that. Especially the color and the canvas. And what are the efficient causes? What are the other factors? His skill, whatever he knows, and his brushes and physical objects and stuff like that. Like light and stuff like that, and a good room, a space, and all those things. These are the causes which contribute to creation of a wonderful painting. However, the father would be sitting there once in a while talking to the son, but the father doesn't become a primary cause. He's a anyatha siddha. Means without him, this thing will still be possible. Okay, so he's saying that they become anyatha siddha. That's sadhu sangama and atma vidya. If you can do pranayama and if you can do vairagya and abhyasa, these two things are anyway going to happen. Toyoho eva antarbhavataha, and therefore they can be included in vairagya and abhyasa. Ata eva bhagavata abhyasena vairagyena cha iti dvayam eva uktam. He's explaining why Bhagavan did not add sadhu sangama. Why did not he add that you should do a bit of study of Upanishads? No, he didn't want to include it. Because in Vairagya, the Upanishad thing will come. In Abhyasa, the Sadhu Sangama will come. Because it's part of the practice aspect, the satsang. Similarly, Upanishad or the study or anything is part of the whole Vairagya sadhana. The technique of having detachment starts with some fundamental understanding from the text as to what is real and what is not, and where we are losing ourselves. So definitely in many places you must have heard that somebody reads one book and transforms his life, right? So these things do happen. Ata eva, okay, Ata eva Bhagavan Patanjalihi Asutraya. So Patanjali has given this sutra in the first chapter, Samadhipada, Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirodhaha. So he says that what is yoga chitta vritti nirodhaha, that you have to stop the chitta vrittis, modifications of the mind, and then he goes on to say that Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirodhaha. Tan means what? Chitta Nirodhaha. How do you do it? Abhyasa and Vairagya. So what it appears that in Bhagavad Gita, this particular sentence, I mean, if you're looking at it as in a very rational way that it is a literary text, then obviously there is a strong influence of the thought of Patanjali Bhagavan on the text called Bhagavad Gita. Tasam praguktanam, and this what I have already explained to you earlier while commenting on verse number 32 or verse number 15 and blah blah blah. Pramana viparya vikalpa nidra smriti rupena Panchavidhanam Anantanam Asuratvena. Okay, Asuratvena Klistanam Devatvena Aklistanam Api Brittinam Sarvasam Api Nirodhe Nirindhana Agnivat Upasamakhyaha Parinama Abhyasena Vairagyena cha Samuchitena Bhavati. So what he's saying, you remember that there are certain vrittis, there you have klista and aklista. those tendencies and those proclivities and modifications of the mind which are going to give us some pain and discomfort and agony. And those modifications of the mind which are sukhatmaka will give you some happiness. So these two, you can say these are asura, asuri and daiva. There's some certain things, daivatvena, and then asuratvena, asura and deva, the auspicious and the inauspicious aspects of it. And those five vrittis that we have, pancha vrittis, are what? Pramana, viparjaya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti. Pramana is what? The cognitive aspect of the mind which focuses on what is true and what's false. Vikalpa is what? Sabdanusayamatra jnanam, where we say that, my hand got burnt in hot water. Literally doesn't mean that. And then you have viparjaya is mithya buddhi, and looking at a stump at night, thinking it's a human being standing there. Or then you have nidra, sleeping, that is also bilaya vritti. The other ones are all vikshepa vrittis. Then smriti, remembrance. These are the five ones. Panchavidhanam, anantanam asuretvan. And the combination of these five, there will be millions and millions of chitta vrittis, and there'll be some asura vrittis because they are klishta, and there'll be aklishta, not causing pain. These are daiva. However, you have to get rid of both to be established in Nirudha Samadhi. Sarvasamapi Nirodha Nirindhana Agnivat Upasamakhya. If you can stop the modification of the mind, then what remains? There's nothing. So if you remove the fuel from an oven, that oven is not going to burn anymore. No, the fire sort of gets diminished, it gets put off. Similarly, Nirindhana Agnivat, it becomes what? Upasamyati, Upasamakhya. It becomes upashama. There's an end to these mental processes. That particular parinama, the result of this practice, abhyasena, this parinama is what? Nirudha samadhi, that equanimity of the mind, where it ceases to modify itself again. There's no more mutation of this virus called chitta. Abhyasena vairagyane cha samuchittena bhavati. You cannot do only abhyasa or vairagya, you have to do it simultaneously. Tad yuktam yoga bhashya. Yoga bhashya is by Vasaspati Mishra, Vyasa bhashya. He says, Chitta nadi namo ubhayato vahini bahati kalyanaya bahati papaya cha. This river called Chitta, the mind river, can flow towards sinfulness, papa or punya or kaivalya, liberation. We have discussed that earlier. That this mind can either run towards inwards or outwards. Inwards, it will go up, go towards Atmajnana. Outwards, connect with external objects of pleasure, and there's a lot of distraction, restlessness. Then you are fragmented. You want to do something, results not coming so fast. Why? You are not there. Where are you? Trapped in several objects of imagination, your aspiration, your desire. So the mind is kind of taken hostage by a lot of thoughts. And you are not there, so how can you achieve anything you want? Okay, so he's saying papaya tatra ya kaivalya pragbhara viveka nimana sa kalyana vaha. When that particular thing, pragbhara, kaivalya pragbhara, when it is moving towards kaivalya, what is that kaivalya? Aham purusha eva, aham brahmasmi. It moves towards that kaivalya prapti, self-realization. Then that particular, the water flows downwards, like, but if it's flowing towards Kaivalya Prapti, self-realization, liberation, that is Kalyana Vaha. It is moving in an auspicious way. Okay, it's flowing in an auspicious way. Sa to aviveka nimana, where this mind is going against your ability to have discrimination, decide what's good, what is bad, what is shreya, what is priya. Sansara pragbhara, where would you go? Towards sansara. That is sa papa vaha. So that is what is carrying sin in it. Kalyana vaha means that mind is carrying, that water is carrying a lot of benediction, a lot of good wishes, positive energies, which is going to enrich your experience of life. And the other way, the mind becomes a papa vaha. It carries a lot of bad energy. It carries a lot of dirt. It carries a lot of dirt. Why? Because it's trapped in old memories of what you loved and what you didn't. Raga Dvesha, that game, the seeds of that game are kind of, being swept in this particular river. Tatra vairagyena vishesrotaha khili kriyate. Now, in that particular thing, what you do it vairagyena, through detachment. What do you do? Vishesrota, that mind, that chitta, which is flowing, that stream is flowing towards what? Objects of pleasure. Khili kriyate, you try to stop it. You reduce it, you thin it, you minimize it, mitigate it, prevent it. Viveka darshanabhyasena sa kalyana shrota udbhatyate. And then by doing viveka darshana, by applying your discrimination in a positive way, by dissociating the good from the bad, then that kalyana shrota, that flow of auspicious energy, positive energy, inspire you to do your yoga sadhana. You strengthen it. You sort of improve its quality and flow. Iti ubhayadhina chitta vritti nirodha iti. So, there are two aspects to this chitta vritti nirodha. The papavadi, mind, when it's flowing towards the garbage yard, stop that water from flowing there. It's going to get dirty. When it's moving towards kaivalya prapti, self-knowledge, allow it to flow. So the river becomes more enriched with positive energy. That is what is chitta vritti nirodha. Then pragbhara nimna pade tada viveka nimnam kaivalya pragbharam chittam. That is again taken from one of these sutras. One of the sutras. Tada viveka nimnam kaivalya pragbharam chittam, Yoga Sutra. That is the 4th chapter, 26th. The 26th sutra of the Kaivalya Pada is mentioning here. Ityatra vyakhyayate tada tivra bego yatha tivra vega upetam nadi pravaham setu bandhanena nivarya kulya pranayen kulya pranayanena क्षेत्राभिमुखिकं तिर्यक प्रवाहांतरम उत्पाद्यते तथा वैराग्येन चित्तनद्या विषय प्रवाहं निर्वाह्य समाधि अभ्यासेन प्रशान्तवाहिता सम्पाद्यते इति द्वारभेदात् समुच्चय एव एकद्वारत्वे हि ब्रीहि यववत् विकल्पः स्यात् इति. Then he has mentioned a long sentence, but it's very simple. What he's trying to say here is that, look, your mind is moving towards Visaya Sukha. It's causing distraction and you're losing hold over yourself. What happens to the water? It's just flowing, it gets getting wasted. You make the river walk, as they say. So you build a dam. Then what do? You divert the channel, you create more channel. Then you take the water where? To your agricultural fields and you do irrigation. It gives you very good result. So this mind, which by nature moves towards objects of pleasure, where it wants to have an experience of raga dvesha, that's its inherited nature as a result of past sanskaras and impressions. So you stop the flow of this mind, which moves in a natural way towards external objects of presumed sources of pleasure. Not necessarily. They are all pleasures come with some pain that we don't recognize, so we pay the price later on. Okay, so you do that and you channel that flow of consciousness, vairagyena. So with vairagya, with detachment, this chitta nadi, that river of your consciousness, visaya pravaham, movement, flow of this, mind river towards the objects of pleasure or experience thereof, nivarya, by blocking it, samadhi abhyasena, by practicing this pranayama and this yoga kriya, by this vasana tyaga and spanda nirodha, doing that particular thing, prasanta vahita sampadyate. We know that it was mentioned that you reach that prasanta vahita state after nirvichara samadhi, tatra ritamvara pragya, which all the time establishes interest. right? And then move towards, then you have that prasanta vahita, the complete, it repeats itself, and there is an experience of great peace within. That prasanta vahita sampadyate iti dvara vedat samuchaya eva. And because there are two different techniques, you have to do it same time. You cannot say that I'll only do vairagya, not abhyas. That will not become sustainable. Only abhyasa, no vairagya. You want to only do japa and no knowledge of Vedanta. That's also is faulty. That is what the Vedantis will all the time emphasize. You have to train your mind to think logically. Just blindly do it, it's a very mechanical exercise. You stop it, the mind functions the way it does. And otherwise, you'll also appear not to be a very balanced person. You might have some siddhis and stuff like that, but that vairagya has not been enriched, it has not been baptized, it has not been certified, so to say, with the benefit of some sort of understanding which comes out of what? Adhyatma Vidyadhigama. That you don't have that, then that's a problem. So he's saying Vairagya and Abhyasa, both you have to do, and then you do it together. If you just do it one, then Brihi Avavat Vikalpa Syaditi. Brihi is some rice thing, right? And Yaba is another kind of, then you do either of these. Okay? Brihi Navahanti, there's a particular injunction in the Vedas. So if you have either I'll do this or I'll do that, then you have vikalpa, there are some doshas, because you'll first do that, that means you are not doing that. So because you are not doing that first, because some other text says it, you have some papa. And then you do this, after that you do it. So you do one thing and there are two mistakes, and then you reverse it, then again you're committing some error because you're contradicting some other injunction somewhere. So the vikalpa has a lot of problems there. So this is what he has established so far, that Vairagya and Abhyasa have to be practiced together. You just don't do it. You can't stand on one leg. You have to stand on both the legs. Okay. So there's a little more commentary left of the sutra, and we'll finish it and we'll go to the sutra, verse number 36 tomorrow. I'll stop here, and if you have any questions, you can ask. And I'm kind of putting an end to the YouTube live cast, and we can do the Santi Mantra after this.